All right, welcome to OLM Issue Triage. Let's first take a look at the open issues against OLM. First issue we have here is how to run the catalog pod with a non-root user. I believe that this is a feature request that is something that we've seen before. And I think we had a PR at one point that tried to implement this. Where's 6? So I'm fairly sure there's no reason for the catalog pod to be running as the root user. Technically speaking, it doesn't need those privileges. There was a PR open to change the root user. Yes, this one.
I think that the problem with this PR is that it forces non-root, and there's no other way to run the pod if you do this.
Right.
And I think that there's some problems with that. And there's also probably some problems with trying to add something to the catalog source API to explicitly enable this. The thing is that there's a way to do this right now, which is
there is. Okay.
Use address type catalog source, stand up your own registry pod, wire it up, and run the pod however you want to run the pod.
So sorry, use address type catalogs or
right. So there's so if you're not familiar with it, right, in the catalog source, there's a field called type.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than pointing to a catalog image, you can point to an IP address on the cluster, right? So if you stand up a service that points to a pod and that pod is a catalog source, you can manage the pod however you want.
So another thing to point out, I just double checked the Red Hat operators registry pod, and it runs as user 1001. So clearly it's possible to run as non-root. I think it might be like, I guess what I'm trying to say here is it might be just as simple as basically doing what this person is asking if you can do, which is to set the user in the Docker file. I guess it's unclear to me what this termination log error is. Maybe that's something we want to go look at and just see what that's about and see whether that's a red herring or not. But I mean, this seems like it should be possible based on what we do internally at Red Hat.
Right, Joe, I think, are you on OpenShift when you're checking that, or are you on vanilla?
I just pulled the index image and did Docker inspect on it.
Okay, on the Red Hat catalog, right? So that's
right.
I think that's right. That's OpenShift. Yeah, but you're right. You're saying there's no technical right. There's no technical reason.
There shouldn't be. I mean, it sounds like this person is saying there's this issue with the termination log path. So maybe we want to follow up on that thing, but it seems like there has to be a way to do it because we're doing it. So I don't know if internally our build pipeline for our internal index image handles that somehow, or whether this is just they're not doing something correctly. Like maybe they need to run as 1001 user, but then group still needs to be root 0. But without actually looking at this more, probably
you do need to edit the user to the root group, if I recall correctly. to use arbitrary IDs. It's just that it can't be the root user itself. But like 1001 ends up being an arbitrary ID in OpenShift.
I guess.
I mean that only happens if you've set that in the Docker file itself.
Right. So it's not that it's OpenShift. It's that generally there are catalogs that run as 1001.
Yeah, but like OpenShift does something special at runtime.
Right. But I think that's
yeah,
that's a separate like cryo thing, right? And like the whole SEC deal, which actually that's a subject of a separate issue, which is actually that we don't do that because, well, it's kind of a long story, but basically the way that SECs work and the precedents and the service account that we're running as, we end up running as 1001, not the randomly assigned namespace, C group namespace user range that we would otherwise get if we were running as like can't remember, restricted SEC is I think the name. So our pods don't do that, but they do run as 1001.
I didn't know that it was tied to the SEC like that.
Okay. Nick, you also mentioned this would be a downstream issue. Is this, oh, it's running on OpenShift. Oh, this is this is on OpenShift and he's saying the pods run as a root user.
Yeah, he's also talking about a specific security policy to things running on OpenShift. So
to me, I think the action here is let's go and look at how OPM builds an index by default. Does it use the root user by default, or does it use a different user? If it's root, then is it possible to change that to use, say, 1001, still use the root group and run it and see what happens? And if we get this, basically we need to try to reproduce this, I think.
Yeah, I think right now we just kind of create it without any explicit security context, the catalog pods.
Again, though, this is about the image build process, not the run process.
Okay. Right, the image build, right? So where the default catalogs are being created, not where they're being run, right? Okay.
it looks like it just passes through whatever the base image is.
Yeah, if they have a custom Docker file, it'll do what that does, right? And if that custom Docker file doesn't specify a user, then it'll use whatever the base image uses.
Right.
Yeah, Nick, it looks like we don't specify user at all. So my guess is you get root right now out of the default Docker file that we generate. I think for the sake of time, why don't you just assign this to me? I can go try to reproduce it. And if it's as simple as just adding a user line to the Docker file, then that's what we can do.
Yeah, I think that's a good good outcome. Let's call this. What's the feature? I will put it in our next release. Does that sound reasonable, Joe?
Do we have a date for that?
Some point in the next few months, I guess.
Okay, then yeah,
It's-
019 is fine.
I think 018 right now, what we have now is sort of based
It's
on
vaguely, so we're trying to do every 3 months, right? So our last release 018 was in April. So 019 is probably sometime late July would be my guess.
okay.
Maybe, yeah, I guess put it in 019. I don't think this would block a 019. So if we get up and we want to do it, and we see that this is, you know, not done yet, we can always push it to 020. It should be fairly straightforward though.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess I'd also like to just mention this one PR as well in here, since it's directly related. Someone put effort into that. Okay, cool. So this one's triage. Next up, we have Flake by Ben. This is something that I talked about a little bit about. We have these, issues tracking flakes. We may want to look into how we tackle them as a team. I know back in some last year and some earlier releases, we kind of swarmed on some of these flakes and got them all out of the way. So it feels like we may need to do the same thing again. For now, this is sort of, I'm just going to assign it to Ben and put it in the backlog. But maybe we should think about ways to address some of our existing flakes. Unless, does anyone have anything else they want to add on this one? So if not, let's go on to the next one. Subscription and CSV don't bind each other. Subscription and CSV can't bind each other.
So Jaiming, you're on the call. Is this
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk to this one?
Yeah, so this one is a defect our team hit several times recently. So when one operator is created or upgraded, we see what I put the graph in this issue. Like we can see one line, it's on the OCP console. It's one line for the subscription, the other one is for the CSV, and we cannot find any status update in the subscription relevant to the install plan or CSV. And also when we check the install plan is completed and CSV deployment has already been created, but there's no status update in the subscription, and that also cause in the catalog operator, it shows an error message like it cannot resolve the subscription. And as for a workaround, we need to delete this CSV and let catalog operator to create it again.
Sorry, I'm looking at I'm in the background. I downloaded the YAML files. I'm looking at the CSV. So it looks like the CSV is not in a succeeded state because it's attempting to install and it can't. So I guess maybe I'm not maybe totally understanding the context. What is not happening here that should be happening?
Shouldn't a subscription be the owner of all CSVs that are created as a result of that subscription, even if it's in a failed state?
So I guess the thing I'm trying to understand is, are you asking why doesn't the subscription have like a status block that specifically calls out the fact that that CSV is unable to upgrade?
Yeah, like from my understanding, it is because the subscription is not updated properly. So there's no status pointing to install plan or CSV. So in that way, when catalog operator reconcile the subscription again, it will hit this problem.
Yeah, so when a subscription is created for the very first time, it has a really clear path to the install plan and the CSVs. When a CSV is or a subscription is updated, right? Those second generation install plans and CSVs are kind of weird during that transitionary process until the whole thing is completed, and then they're kind of rebound together. That's my observation as well. It seems like the subscription should have all the intermediate bindings to all those intermediate install plans and CSVs.
I see. Okay.
You'll observe this in the console, because all of a sudden you'll see two CSVs show up and they'll look like you've got duplicate subscriptions. It's kind of weird.
Right. So yeah, I think it's important to note that the subscription object is not it was not built or intended to be a top level owner of all the status of everything that is a downstream object of as a result of actually installing an operator. I think that looking for or expecting that to happen is probably not something that is ever going to really be easily able to be supported. I think that in this case, like what you're looking at is that there's an update happening. The update is not completing successfully, and the status of did that new update actually succeed and then get applied to the cluster and have OLM pivot to start using that new version it is probably not as well tracked as maybe it could be, right? I think that when you're observing the status in the subscription, it is attempting to aggregate the information of the fact that there's another version of the operator that actually is still handling content until that happens. I don't know that. I mean, I think it's probably fair to call out that there's probably some improvements that can be made there. I think that if you look at the higher order object that exists, which is the operator API, you will see all of that status and it'll be aggregated in a better way. But I don't know that there's like, I don't know that there's an easy path to success here, but of trying to have the subscription attempt to do something else than it does right now. I don't know if anybody else has some like really better ideas about this specific edge case. I think we've spent a bunch of time trying to improve subscription status to kind of needle out some of these like really specific edge cases. But specifically for like update pivot stuff, I don't know that we have a path forward with the current APIs to really improve this UX all that much, not easily anyway. And I think we're probably going to spend more of our time working on the new version of the APIs to improve some of this.
So does the operator API as it does today have this information, this intermediate information in it? So or does it also have the same problem as the subscription today?
So the operator API should have an aggregation of subscription, install plan, and CSV, right? Like you're going to see this specific status on the CSV. And so that operator API is going to have the status information of that CSV
So it's going to have,
aggregated in a way that is readable.
but it's going to have both, right? So it's going to have both install plans, the original one and the new one, or does the original install plan get erased?
It'll have reference to all of it, not
So
just
maybe,
to the latest install plan.
right. So I guess maybe, Jaiming, maybe what we need to do is create a Bugzilla against OpenShift to improve their console to read the operator APIs rather than the subscription APIs to get that information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be an option.
So I guess that's sort of what I'm trying to drive at, is like, what is the underlying problem with this, that this issue is trying to call out, is the relationship between the OpenShift console and how it shows that status aggregation.
But there is another issue. So when it happens, the catalog operator, it will be blocked by this operator. So even if we create other following operators in the same namespace, they won't be reconciled.
So that's I think a very separate issue, which is also well known and has everything to do with the way that OLM aggregates operator installs because of the way that it handles dependency resolution. And I don't know that we have a path forward there either. I think there's already definitely some other issues in the backlog that specifically call out that particular problem.
Maybe we should find them and post them.
Yeah.
Here to sort of help track progress on it. But yeah, we're looking at making both pivoting and dependency resolution a lot better. There still will definitely be cases where for a subset of dependent operators, installs will be blocked when an upgrade is pending. I don't think we can get out of that. This today is where everything in a namespace is blocked, is a consequence of taking a shortcut, because we can't really know which operators are related, because as you update and traverse along a graph of dependent operators, the graph could become disconnected. It could become connected again. So like managing that in a way that makes sense from UX as a UX perspective is a problem we kind of kicked the can on, because I think you'll find that it's after you start thinking about how to represent that, it'll kind of become clear that it's a pretty hard UX problem to solve. So that'll be a lot of work, and we could definitely use your help there. Does that make sense from like user perspective?
Yeah. I believe it helps us to understand, what is the root cause of this issue. And I will also, bring the conclusion back to my team to see if we can handle this kind of crash from our side. Like if we can add some operator health check to try to restart these operators when they crash into this kind of data, to make sure it won't blocking other operator installation. Because we are going to the SaaS environment, so this kind of upgrade or install issue may causing a big impact to the product. So this is one thing we are considering right now.
The one thing I don't quite understand there is which operators are you restarting to fix this?
For example, this one, just like this one, we need to delete the CSV, and usually we also delete the subscription and recreate it. So this would be a workaround for this situation.
It's interesting that it works after you do that. It makes me think we haven't got to the root cause of why that didn't work in the first place.
So it is an internet issue and not can be reproduced every time.
Okay.
This is one of those transient retriable cases that's not retried.
Yeah, fair.
So yeah, I guess we would need to detect when we have one of those transient errors, and we'd have to kick it basically to restart it again.
Mm.
We should also post the install plan stuff, Kevin.
Yeah, I am. Wait, when you say install plan stuff, are you referring to the retry stuff that we were looking at? Or are you talking
Yeah,
about
just
are we talking
to-
about upgrades, blocking and namespaces?
Retries, even if that conversation ends in the new APIs and controllers will fix this, but just so that it's not lost, the thread isn't lost with respect to this bug.
Here, I found an upstream issue that talks about that. That is a little bit out of date. There's probably a couple pull requests we can point to that improve a subset of that retrying. But I think this is definitely one of the cases that is not currently tracked.
Okay.
So I can't remember, last time we met 2 weeks ago, we talked about adding another label or milestone or something like that that indicated the next gen API to make sure this gets, make sure we resolve this in the next iteration or the next API set. Is that where you want to put this?
Yeah, I think that we should, if we haven't already created that label.
Okay, I'm just trying to add some color based on what we discussed. We discussed quite a bit here. Here's a similar issue. Do we feel like we have the next step here? Is there something we want to track in the backlog? Is there something actionable?
I think that the actionable thing is consider this particular problem as a subset of the problem that we're trying to solve with the bundle API. And so it sounds like what we want to do is we want to start trying to track that. Let's leave this tracked as a bug, and maybe add a label v2 APIs that references it. And I think we should expect that to get resolved as part of the changes we're going to make to pivoting with the bundle API.
Yeah, like the provisioner.
This one is also kind of like a little bit further on than the bundle API. It probably has to do with, that's one for pivoting between bundles and sets of bundles. But then the next layer is resolution, and that's a little bit more unclear to me right now in terms of like, now I get a set of bundles that may or may not connect at different points in time along different update graphs. How do I have something to pivot that under that users can follow without getting lost, if that makes sense. But the first step is definitely the bundle API.
Right. Okay. We spent quite a bit on this one, so that was productive. I think in terms of triaging it, we want to kind of link it to the bundle API work. I'm going to put it in the backlog then for now. There's nothing really actionable at this point. And I will.
Yeah, I think last time we said we're going to use the 1.0 milestone because we thought it would be kind of bundled in that. I think that's why they created the 1.0 is because that's the next gen API. You recall that? Because you do have a 1.0 milestone in there now.
Yeah, I think Evan was probably calling it 1.0. So we can just put, I would just put that on there for now. At least it gives us a tag, right?
Right.
Okay. Nick, do you want to take this one? It's sort of related.
And I would also, I'll probably follow up here. You might be able to get away with just deleting the install plan and the CSV, depending on how much you have installed there, rather than everything. But that's just a last minute thought I had on that.
All right. Just want to keep moving forward a bit here. That was a pretty complex issue. Okay. SA owner reference isn't updated during operator upgrade. This is also by Horace.
Yeah, I opened this one as well. So we observed this issue during the operator upgrade. So and also we found this issue probably has been solved by an existing PR, but it's not in the some old operator version. OLM version or OpenShift version. So yeah, so in this issue, we want to confirm if the PR I add into this issue have solved this defect, and also we hope to know which OLM version or which OpenShift version has included this fix.
Yeah, so I actually took a look at when the patch went in and which errata it was released with for OpenShift. It seems like it went in at 2 C-Stream releases previous to the one you're encountering it on as a backport. So we should attempt to replicate and see and figure out exactly why this is still happening. I don't have any ideas other than what that patch solves. So
okay, so it sounds like this is something that that we expect to no longer be an issue in that particular version, but it seems like it is. So, okay, so Nick, seems like you're following up here. Seems like this is something that we do want to address pretty soon if we can, since it
assign me to this and I can attempt to reproduce it.
It seems like I think we could put it into the next one. I don't know. Either way, either it's not reproducible when we close it, or it's something with the bug fix didn't go right. Even right, since that went through QE, I mean, they must have verified it.
Did you leave, Horace, did you leave the particular operators that you're using? It could help me reproduce a little bit more quickly.
Yeah, but the operator we are using is actually a product. So,
Okay.
but this issue is not it didn't happen to all the operator. So we upgrade almost 20 operator, and it appear on 2 of them.
Okay. Is it the same 2 every time? Have you seen this like happen
I don't
repeatedly?
I don't think it's happen every time. Just think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Nick, for volunteering to look into this one. It seems like it might still be an issue. Moving on. This one is around TLS key support. I looked into this one briefly. Basically, the issue is the way we generate the key for this in the self-signed certs. The reporter is asking for us to convert it to a different format. Beyond the idea that we want to sort of get out of managing certs directly and rely on something more like Cert Manager. I'm not sure that there's that much that we can do. I'm not sure if the reporter is on the call.
I think the ask is just that we wrap. We change the way the certs are generated so that it is in the PKCS8 format, which is a newer one. It's just I took a look into this a little bit earlier. It's going to be interesting because I don't know if everything that depends on this right now, all the aggregate APIs and webhooks, will have a problem with the change to that format. I don't know that we can be sure that they won't. Mm-hmm. So doing this in a backwards compatible way is going to be pretty key. So we could do something potentially where we create a second, another volume mount in every API service or webhook that we make that has the PK blah 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 encoded format, and people who need that can just change their operator definitions to look into a different volume mount. Right. But that's just off the top of my head. Unless we find that that format is completely backwards compatible with the existing one already, and then it's not going to be a problem.
Okay, I think that's it. That's a reasonably good solution. All right, so I'm not super familiar with this new format. I also said that we can definitely review a patch, so I don't know if the reporter is interested in helping with this, or we can look at it. I think we want to call this a feature. Yes. I don't know that we need to necessarily commit to a specific release at this point, based on just priorities.
It feels like backlog is probably where this goes. I don't know that we're I don't know that we want to say we need to do this right now.
Yeah. In terms of assignees, I can assign it to myself. I was kind of engaging the reporter, so I'll keep following up with them. But yeah, if they had, if you know, if someone were to open a patch with this type of thing, I think we would potentially support it. Okay, yeah, so it's already 45 minutes in. Let's move on to registry. Okay. Remove non-existent operator does not produce an error or warning message. Okay, so this looks like straightforward UI improvement. It's UX improvement. I'm just gonna assign this to, well, is anyone on the call interested in looking at this?
It seems like a good first issue.
Yeah. We can probably put this in the next release, maybe. Or maybe not.
This feels like not a super high priority thing. I think we want to put it on backlog.
Backlog. Okay. Do we want to assign it, or maybe we can see if
I don't know, it feels like something that we can leave unassigned.
Okay, I believe it's still triaged if it's unassigned, in the sense that I can check the query if it comes up again or not. Okay, cool. Next one, library code should only log at a debug level. Right, Joe, so you opened this basically on the log level.
Yeah, as I was implementing some of the declarative config stuff for the render command, where it goes and uses the container D registry to pull images, I noticed that there were like info logs that were coming out that I would rather not come out unless the user specifies like, give me more logs, because they're basically like the happy path produced a bunch of extraneous logs. And because the render command prints stuff to standard out, and that's the expected place that people will find stuff, it just kind of, it does send to standard error, I think. But regardless, if you're sitting on the console looking at the output, it's kind of intermingled. So I opened this just because I think it probably makes sense for especially like happy path logs to be debug level, or to be able to be disabled. So what I ended up doing in the render command is just disabling, just sending the logs from the underlying components that were sending these logs to just the io-util.discard writer, and then we don't see them. But then you never see any logs. So I think probably the right solution is something that only happens on like basically only debug logs come out, but only if the user wants them to, or the library caller wants them to. And then like any errors or anything, rather than like producing error log messages, should just return errors to the caller, and then the caller can decide whether they want to log them or not.
Is there any idiomatic sort of patterns we can use for Golang modules, or I should say libraries, I guess, libraries of code? I'm thinking of something like these libraries shouldn't have logs, and you should perform all of your logging at like the top level interface that depends on them. So like if I have a command line utility, the stuff that is explicitly the command line stuff is where all my logs are going to be. And then all of like the stuff that actually does the heavy lifting and the work doesn't have logs in it.
In general, I agree with that. I think the hard part is when you get into the debug layer of stuff, there's going to be things happening inside your library that like you can't, like, unless your library is so tiny, like, so if everything is so decomposed in your library that you can call each individual thing, that it's not a very useful library. So I think there's going to be a point where the library itself, it makes sense to log stuff there. But in my opinion, the only thing it should log inside the library is debug level things.
Yeah, we should like dependency inject the log record.
Which we do. We do inject the logger. But the problem is, like, I want to be able to log stuff at the info level in my command line utility, but not at the info level in the library. And so like, there's probably a way to do it, but it gets really complicated. So I think just as a general rule, I think what I'm suggesting is like, let's try to make our library code only log at the debug level.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Though it does, like, since we dependency inject, it does bring up the thought that like maybe logging, this is a tangent and I'll stop in a second, I promise. Maybe logging utilities, or at least if we can find one where you can basically wrap the level of the thing that you're then going to inject somewhere else, so that it doesn't explicitly say whether something like is info, debug, warning, error, or whatever, but depending on what you've injected. Yeah.
So there's the logger library, or actually it's just an interface, but there's a logger Go interface that has that feature. So maybe that's something we can look at. Maybe Logris does too, but I just haven't delved deep into it enough. I should say log R.
Yeah, and so,
but I think you can.
Sorry.
I think you can backlog this. I don't think this is super high priority. If it comes up in a future feature that we're writing, then maybe we pick it off and do it at that point. But I don't think there's anything urgent with it. And I'd say this is maybe a good first issue. At the very least, basically, we could go into our library code and change all of our Logris lines to use debug naively, and then we could review that and make sure that that's really what we want.
Okay, cool. Next one, add hashes for release binaries. So this is something I did in the last OLM release. We probably do want to do this for registry releases as well. I think, wait, we have a different registry process now. I think that, it's more or less automated. I don't know if we have the shells in that. No, we do not.
This is definitely in the theme of the larger, let's make our release process better. I don't know if you see, I can try to find that issue in the background and we can link it.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I think
Go releaser will do this for us.
Go releaser, yeah, I think. This issue's been around for a while, so, but yeah, I think let's just put it in the next release as something we want to do. I think can commit to that. We don't have to change the whole release process. So you could do. I mean, I simply made a file with the hash with the checksums and put it into release payload.
Yeah, I think that's probably reasonable to try to
Reasonable.
get something. Yeah.
This is related to 654. If you want to throw that in there, it's not quite the same thing, but
654.
it's all in the realm of producing better release stuff, release artifacts.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And I won't really assign it to the, I guess it depends on who ends up doing that particular next minor version release. Might as well. Okay. Next up, probably have time for one or two more. Add bundle to index errors, specified images of Docker schema v1 manifest, which is not supported. Right, so I've seen this issue before. Basically, we don't support Podman. Okay, there's definitely a lot going on in this issue.
I have a very, very strong inkling that the problem here is somewhere between Builda and Quay. Like, I mean, certainly, like, there's nothing we can do here, right? Like,
do we want to just close and say, as it's not clear what actions? Is that I think what we're gonna, I unless someone wants to. This issue has also been around for 6 months, over 6 months at this point. So if it did, I don't know.
yeah, I'm just trying to remember. I vaguely remember having a conversation with Jeff McCormick about this. He did like a bunch of digging to try to see if he could reproduce it.
Right.
And that is where I'm trying to, like, I'm reading through this. I'm almost certain that that's what this is that is an issue where Podman and Builda are doing something either because they're expecting a schema to be a certain way or something like that. And sometimes the Quay interacts differently than other times. I think this was like a really ugly kind of problem. It feels like if somebody wants this to work, they need to put an issue on to the Podman GitHub page. I don't know. I don't think that, I think we did enough debugging to say, well, it seems like there's something else going on here. So I think it's reasonable to close this.
Yeah, Jeff linked the bug there too.
Oh, there's actually a reference already? Cool.
And it closed it. It's Builda issue 2317.
Yeah. Okay, well, not, yeah, I mean, I think we could just leave it this for now and just get this off the backlog. All right, well, we closed one issue today. That's good. Okay, OPM registry add doesn't detect dependency.yaml problems. Chris, looks like this is one that you opened. We have just a few minutes left. See if we can triage this.
Oh man, this is so long ago. I'm trying to remember this one.
Yeah. Registry add, index add. Schema format
yeah.
has been valid.
Yeah, so when this dependencies YAML's got a bad schema or something like that, then no one really ever gets to know.
Right, and some range. So is this, I don't know, maybe someone like Kevin or Nick on the call say, is this still true? I mean,
It's a good question. It seems
Yeah.
like we probably should be parsing the file, but it might be that there's. I mean, I am fairly confident that there's code in the API that like serializes this thing, but if there's not, then that's where it needs to go. So I think we'd have to reproduce it, but it seems like it's possible that this is not working.
Yeah, I guess we just ran a lot of pain with this one, especially because people have been looking at the wrong Semver range spec. A lot of people have been using the masterminds one versus the beeline.
Well, so that's the second point is I think that's very likely that we're not saying whether the Semver range, like the value of the version field is valid or not. I think that probably is not implemented at all. The thing that I am a little surprised about is that the schema syntax of the file itself is not being parsed.
Yeah, I think it's maybe not this. Let's see, where did I run into this? Oh yeah, so the reason I ran into this now is the OLM, or sorry, the OpenShift documentation had some old schema in there from an old rendition of the dependencies YAML. And so that's what I was using. And it didn't complain about that, but it didn't honor anything in it. So that was way back in September. So I would have to retry it again to see if the new versions of OPM look at that.
It probably like transparently passed it through because it didn't detect it as a dependency.
That's what I'm thinking too. I'm guessing if it was just extra data, right, that it just ignored.
Yeah. Though does bring up an interesting question, since like our extension point for a lot of our stuff is we'll allow you to pass things through opaquely so that your clients can use them later.
Yeah, it's the optional fields problem, yeah. Right? So how do you deal with that and yet be helpful? I mean, I think if there was nothing in it, I think if you supplied a dependencies YAML, but yet the parser didn't find anything, that seems like a problem because they must have something wrong. I mean, there's probably some cases that you can we could probably be more helpful with. And of course, for the pieces that are there, make sure they're the right way.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we want to look into this. I think maybe if not in this one, then the next one. We can put it into this one for now, into this release for now, and go from there. I think I think this is a productive session today. Thank you everyone for attending, and we'll see you at the working group next week. So thanks everyone.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Thanks.